Good day, I'm Derek Fildebrandt. Welcome to The Pipeline. Today is March 31st, 2012. Pleased to be with you. Today I'm joined by Dave Naylor, news editor of the Western Standard. Good day, Dave.
Hey, Derek.
And Corey Morgan, Alberta political columnist and host of the Corey Morgan Show. Good day, Corey.
Good afternoon.
And a very special guest on the show today, Nathan Gita, who is our brand new BC political columnist and will soon be launching as host of the Mountain Standard Time, another show that'll be playing Tuesday, Wednesday, and Thursday. How you doing, Nathan?
I'm doing very well. Thanks for having me on.
Pleasure to have you. He's coming to us from beautiful city of Prince George. I drove the deck clock through it once, but I really just picked it up from the airport. So I can't really say I've spent much time. So I'm assuming it's beautiful. I'm taking your word for it.
Yeah, I'm hometown. Others might not as much. But
Right on. Okay, well, today we're going to be getting into, we've got a great show. British Columbia is under a full lockdown again. We've had one lockdown, yes. What about second lockdown? Actually, isn't this third lockdown? We're going to come to that, especially with Nathan. We've got a group of very prominent Albertans, some doctors, former high-ranking military and emergency management officials have challenged Jason Kenney and Kenney Hinshaw to a debate. We're going to find out if they have any intention of taking it up. Spoiler, they don't. And Pastor James Coates is free from jail. That's right, we're no longer jailing people for preaching, at least in Alberta. So at least we're somewhat more free than the Soviet Union now. We're going to get into all three topics, but first, we want to thank our Western Standard members. If you're not yet a member of the Western Standard, please check it out. You can try the Western Standard for 15 days free, see if you like it. You're supporting bailout-free, Western-owned and Western-operated media. Check it out at westernstandardonline.com/membership. And today, of course, our show is sponsored by Chiron's Way. Chiron's Way provides natural, non-pharmaceutical treatments for stress relief, for anxiety, the kind of things that plague a lot of people a lot of the time, but especially plague most of the people most of the time right now. Check out chironsway.com for more information for very affordable treatments for your stress and anxiety, that kind of thing. Well, let's jump into it. British Columbia under a full lockdown again. Dave, why don't you set the table for us?
The government announced this week, Derek, that full lockdown again. There'll be no more indoor dining allowed, so you can't go into a restaurant. You can stay outside if you like, and hope your weather is nice and it's not raining. But only restaurants can open for takeout and delivery. That nobody can actually go in it. So it's just a return to the old methods. British Columbia, like all of the provinces across Canada, seen an increase recently in the number of COVID cases and the number of variant cases. So they are doing a sharp 3-week circuit breaker. I know Ontario is also going into a lockdown as of tomorrow. So those two provinces, full lockdowns there.
Nathan, I obviously really want to hear from you here. How many lockdowns is this now? What is this second? Is this third? Is this fourth? How many lockdowns has this been now, and what is the reaction in British Columbia to it?
I think we're essentially at lockdown 2.5. The original lockdown that started about this time last year got us well into May, I believe, originally. And then some restrictions were relaxed through the summer and into the fall. And then right after the election, where, of course, the BC NDP won a majority, they brought back in the lockdown about a month later in November. We've been in that lockdown ever since. That lockdown originally consisted of really essentially the churches being closed. There wasn't really much else that changed. It was worship services that were mostly the most affected. And of course, there was still indoor dining. Of course, you could still go into Costco and Walmart. You just couldn't go into places that were places of worship. And then it appeared that we might have an Easter miracle. Obviously, we're right before the Easter weekend here, Holy Thursday, Good Friday, and of course, Easter Vigil and Resurrection Sunday are coming. Of course, in other faiths, there are very big days ahead as well. And what happened was it appeared that Dr. Bonnie Henry would give us the chance to go back to church at a very reduced capacity. And then out of nowhere, that was ripped away from us. Simultaneously, indoor dining was also suspended.
Well, and that lovely. Glad you could lead the way. Corey, do you think Premier Jason Kenney, do you think Premier Scott Moe, how closely do you think they're watching this, and how likely do you think they are to follow in the footsteps of Horgan and Ford?
Well, and the worst part is they're probably watching the polls and probably communicating for internals, not the actual health aspect. And the maddening and almost insulting thing with this is when they bring in these lockdowns, they keep saying it's because you guys misbehaved. If you guys would just behave yourselves, we wouldn't have to keep doing this. And you know what? This is a government that's supposed to be supporting me, not my nagging parent.
If only I didn't go to Hawaii or Mexico.
Yeah, no doubt.
You know,
and there's a lot of questions on the efficacy of these lockdowns. I mean, it's inconsistent. You know, we're really looking on the state side, Texas, Mississippi, South Dakota. Their numbers are still dropping, and they opened right up. California has had some of the strongest restrictions in North America, and their numbers are through the roof. There's factors, there's something going on, but it seems that these government restrictions really don't necessarily, they have a negligible impact on it. But it's the go-to for government every time they get scared. And it's crushing businesses. They really keep setting aside what the cost of these lockdowns are. I mean, in Alberta, we're having 1 to 2 people a day dying now. I mean, it's terrible for those 1 or 2 senior citizens, but how many people are committing suicide? How many people are going bankrupt? How much domestic abuse is going on? Substance abuse, overdoses. We've really got to start getting real, and this seesaw lockdown thing is terrible, and there seems to be no end to it.
I'll bet you, Corey, dollars to donuts, Premier Kenney's just waiting to get through the Easter holiday period, and then he will shut the province down again. We've exceeded the 300 mark in hospitalizations. That's back up. We're getting more than 300 variants a day. I'm sure he's getting Dr. Hinshaw whispering in his ear, lockdown, lockdown, lockdown. So does he have the political capital left? You were telling us earlier, talking to a restaurant owner who told you that she'll have to close their doors if another lockdown comes.
Yeah, they can't take any more. They're hanging by a thread. They've taken out the loans. They've taken out the subsidies. But they're all just barely hanging in there. One more slap to them, and a lot of them are just saying, you know what, I might as well just pull the pin, go bankrupt, and see what happens in a few years.
The greatest tragedy of this all is that I've already lost my favorite bar in Alberta, a Worst. There's no more German beer hall left in Calgary. I mean, either someone's got to open it up, or I'm going to sell the Standard, and I'm going to open a bar.
You don't know what you're getting.
Yeah, I probably shouldn't do it.
You can call it the pipeline.
There we go. Nathan, I mean, I unfortunately fear that we're going to be following in your footsteps soon. But, you know, what's really the reaction on the ground here? Are British Columbians, I know here the government loves Jason Kenney is kind of envious of Doug Ford. The more he cracks down in Ontario, the more his popularity goes up. We seem to have quite the opposite phenomenon here. The government seems to think its popularity is vital, or that lockdowns are vital to maintaining public support. But the more they do it, the more it goes down. What's the politics to this on the ground in British Columbia? If you're now in another lockdown, lockdown 2.5, as you said, is this going to have any effect on the popularity of the government? I know they were reelected with a big majority. But also, how are the BC Liberals handling this? Are they at all different than how the BC NDP is handling it?
I think something that's interesting about what happened last year is that the BC Liberals, for the most part, played the lapdog to the BC NDP. They didn't resist any of their projects or policies around the pandemic, or maybe question them or bring up some kind of oppositional sort of ideas, alternatives to the way that things were going. For that, they were rewarded with an absolutely crushing defeat at the polls. And so I think without contrast, without providing an opposition, any party, and that goes for any party, left wing or right wing, is always in deep danger of losing its supporters, because what's the alternative? They could vote for you, but they'll get it with the other guy. I think coming back to what's going on in British Columbia on the ground, there seems to be essentially, as there always is, at least kind of four camps. You have your extremities, both for and against the lockdowns. And then you have people who are kind of in the fair to Midland. Where it goes for us in the northern interior is that for the most part, it doesn't really seem to affect us that much. Of course, it affects us when we try to get into a church door, and now the restaurants are closed. And of course, that's a deep tragedy, and these people need to be compensated. And honestly, they just need their businesses reopened. It's absolutely ridiculous, and they were given no warning. But the fact of the matter remains is that it just feels like it's all above our heads. The average person, I don't think, really tunes in anymore to when Dr. Henry speaks. No offense, Dr. Henry. And the fact of the matter is it just seems like so much hoopla. We've been a year into this. Things have gone up. Things have gone down. What does any of it mean? I don't know if anyone really has a clue anymore, and nobody really cares. They want to just move on with their lives.
Well, that's certainly depressing, but probably unfortunately correct. Nathan, I know you got to run. You're here for a good time, not a long time, but we appreciate the time you gave us. Just a reminder for everyone, Nathan Gita is going to be starting Mountain Standard Time, a show that's going to run 10 to 12 Mountain Standard Time every Tuesday, Wednesday, and Thursday, and 9 to 11 Pacific Standard Time, where you are. It's going to be a great show. We look forward to having you on starting next week.
Thank you so much.
Very good. Okay, you take care, Nathan.
Absolutely.
Well, that's just wonderful, but it sounds like there's probably a bit more of a debate about lockdowns, about mask restrictions. The war on fun, I think, has now gone nuclear, it's fair to say. There's a bit more of a debate on that, I think, here in Alberta, where I think opposition is, there is opposition in every province, but I think I'm very proud that the opposition is the largest here in Alberta. We had a very interesting debate challenge, I think, yesterday come out that, Dave, you had the scoop on. Why don't you tell us what happened?
Yeah, Dirk, this involves a group of very respected medical people, former military, high-ranking people, and they've got together and sort of formed their own emergency response unit. And they've issued a formal challenge to Premier Kenney to come out and publicly debate them. I think he gave them a list of 6 questions that they were willing to debate. They had a moderator all picked out, and they're basically against all of the Alberta COVID lockdown regulations, saying they're doing more harm than more good. So the challenge was issued. One of the people, interestingly involved, is Dr. Dennis Modry, who we've all dealt with before. He's a world-famous heart surgeon in Alberta, performed the first heart transplant at the University of Alberta in 1985. He's got an absolute alphabet of initials past his name that I don't even understand, but he's very well respected. He wrote a letter to the Premier last year that got literally hundreds of thousands of views worldwide. Kenney finally responded a couple weeks ago. And Dr. Modry has actually responded today. I've got a hold of a letter he has sent to the Premier this morning. I'll be publishing that as soon as we're done the show here. And again, he doubles down and challenges Kenney to a public debate. Western Standard reached out to Premier Kenney's office for comment, and we've heard not a peep back. But I think there's two chances of a debate. One is slim, and the other is none. I don't think it's going to happen, Derek.
Thanks, Dave. Corey, Dr. Modry originally penned some private letters to Jason Kenney. He both Kenney and Redmond, Colonel Redmond, they both wrote. I think this was this in November, or was this December? I think the private letters were in November.
November, yeah.
Private letters were in November. Nothing happened. Both of these gentlemen came to us. We published Dr. Dennis Modry's letter, open letter in the Western Standard in December. Up till that time, at least, it was our most read story ever. This open letter, it was very fascinating stuff. Kenney has only just now responded to Dennis Modry after this has now gotten a lot of play finally. And is Dennis Modry's reply to the reply on our site now, or
no, not yet? It'll be coming up. It's a very detailed response, paragraph by paragraph. He cuts apart the Premier's arguments. Very interesting. Lots of links in there. So make sure you check back at westernstandardonline.com, and we'll put all 3 letters up, and you can judge for yourself.
We should do a poll. Which one people like more?
Absolutely.
Although I might predict the results from our
you don't need to be a top pollster to figure it out.
I think I know our readership well enough to know how people would vote on that. Corey, how damaging do you think this is of the government? This back and forth. There is Dr. Modry's letter, but now there's the debate challenged Kenney and Hinshaw. When I first saw this come across my desk, I think my reaction was, I don't think they're taking it up. I won't even ask you if you think they're going to take it up, because there's no chance they're taking it up.
It's not that.
But do you think this is going to have much of an effect on things? Because this is not you and me challenging them to a debate. We have opinions on these matters, but we're not experts. These people are incredible experts, though. This is Dr. Dennis Modry, one of the most respected and renowned doctors still alive in Alberta today. Redmond was in the letter, right?
Yes.
Yeah, Redmond, a retired Lieutenant Colonel David Redmond, who was also the head of Alberta's emergency response agency for the province here. These are not casual people. These are not angry people commenting on a Twitter thread. These are about as credible and high-ranking as you can get. Do you think this is going to have any kind of effect?
I think over time, this debate's happening whether the government likes it or not. So they would be well served to start participating in it and quit hiding behind their bureaucrat health experts, because we're seeing that across the country. And these are doctors. They do care for the people, the head, health experts for governments, but that they're basement bureaucrats, and they've been stuck in this role for a year. And I think they've lost touch with reality outside of their bubbles, to be honest. The old vapid case people would make in the early part of the pandemic was, you're not a doctor, you can't speak to it. You're not a doctor, you can't speak to it. Well, we've had a number of doctors on. And if you haven't seen Danielle Smith's specials with the Western Standard, go to our YouTube channel, look back. She has sat 2-hour interviews with doctors, medical doctors, speaking on this. There's a lot of questions. There's a lot of debate. The Great Barrington Declaration, that was a story that recently came up on the Standard. This is signatories, thousands of doctors, medical experts that have questions. They're concerned. They're looking at, how effective lockdowns are, how this virus moves. It's not, there's not just one solid opinion. It seems the governments are all stuck in one solid opinion, but more and more are coming out of the woodworks. This discourse is happening, whether they like it or not, and they would be well served to take part. But no, I don't think they will. We saw with the last announcement, Jason Kenney was hiding. He left it to Dr. Hinshaw and to the health minister to come out. He's got to come out and show some leadership.
Yeah, I don't think anything's happening. But I think this probably increased the pain a little bit more when we enter our third lockdown. We're still under a semi-lockdown right now, but I think if we start falling backwards here, I don't know. I think the government's got no moral authority to do this. We had the Snowbird scandal. We had them throwing pastors in jail. We had them trying to fine businesses for reopening. The only reason we got to any partial reopening whatsoever was the restaurant revolution we had with Whistle Stop and other small independent restaurants opening. Then we got this phased reopening because the government knew they couldn't stop it. I know you've written very well on this in the past. Dave, you've covered it in detail on the news side. If they lock us down again, I've got a feeling that a lot of these restaurants are going to say, no, we know what happened the last 2 times we closed. The only reason we got to reopen again is because we said we denied the authority of the government, the authority of the state to destroy our businesses anymore. I'd like to hear from maybe both of you, but do you think there's a significant chance that a lot of businesses just refuse to close again if they try this?
Well, it's a good question, Derek. Does the government have the political capital to go to lockdown 3? I think the increase in civil discontent would be huge. Pastor Coates, who we'll get to in a few minutes, has urged people to continue to peacefully publicly demonstrate. The demonstrations on every Saturday in downtown Calgary seem to be growing by leaps and bounds. Certainly the the comments and notes that we get here at the Western Standard are overwhelmingly people have just had enough. I think the other thing is that when people are taken to court after being charged, all the charges are seemingly being dropped. So they seem to have lost that threat, that hammer over people that if you don't follow the law, you're going to get charged. Because apparently the Crowns don't think the charges are going to stick.
I know we had one reader from Clint Upham who says that he thinks YouTube took down the interview with Daniel Smith and the three doctors.
I think it's there. You might have to click and look under live broadcasts, past live broadcasts. It makes it a little harder to find, but if you click on that, you'll find all the live ones. It gives it a differerent category. But I'm pretty confident it's still there, Clint. Although I'm certainly going to check as soon as we're done. That was an important interview.
I just made a note now. Yeah, that was record viewership. Just a ton of people have watched that on YouTube and Facebook combined, and the podcast downloads. And we actually should start reminding people to subscribe to the podcast if they're not, because a lot of you are watching this on Facebook Live or on YouTube Live. But make sure you subscribe to the podcast. You can catch it after the fact very easily. We're replacing talk radio. At least we're going to try. But yeah, we're gonna. I've been worried about that particular video getting pulled down because we had three doctors in the deplatform doc show, and they were certainly contradicting the WHO, contradicting Fauci in the States or Theresa Tam here. So we've been worried about getting it pulled down. Best I know, it hasn't been pulled down yet. So we've uploaded it to some alternative areas in case they do pull it down. But yeah, we'll check and make sure. Okay, well let's move on. I guess these things just segue very nicely and easily sometimes. Pastor James Coates, Danielle has interviewed both Pastor Coates' wife, Erin Coates, and just last night interviewed Pastor James Coates himself. He is now free from jail. Dave, why don't you tell us about his release, the conditions of the release? I know they had Sunday service just this last Sunday. Why don't you tell us how that about his release so far and how Sunday service went?
Yeah, he's being released with no conditions attached. You remember he's jailed for more than a month for refusing to abide by a condition to stop preaching. But he's now out. He can do what he wants. And he showed up on Sunday back at his packed Grace Life Church and actually did preach. Stunningly, the RCMP and Alberta Health Services attempted to enter the church minutes before he took the pulpit and were blocked by church elders. So it was a great interview last night with Danielle Smith and Pastor James. And he talked about that. I mean, just how stunning it was to see the RCMP show up, after just getting released from jail. Imagine the nerves that would cause. He told Danielle about his time in jail, 2 weeks in solitary COVID confinement, only allowed out of his cell a couple times a day for 15 minutes at a time. He said the food wasn't good. He woke up one morning dizzy, couldn't get out of bed because of lack of nutrients. When he was released into the general population, things improved on the food-wise because he could access the canteen. He quickly learned the prison code. You don't call other inmates certain names. Other inmates came to him for actual pastoring, and they read Bible passages and sang songs. And he's out. He was still in contact with his cellmate. So he spent more than a month in there. He was out, took to the pulpit on Sunday. Told Danielle last night he still feels like public enemy number one. He says he's like a marked man with provincial health authorities, but he vowed to continue doing what he does. Big religious weekend, as you know, coming up. He'll likely hold a Good Friday service and a Sunday service, and I'm sure the RCMP will be in attendance again. And he did say in terms of the next lockdown, he's pleased with the number of Albertans demonstrating. He stressed specifically that it needs to be peaceful demonstrations, but he said that's the only way that Alberta government's going to change. And he had some very harsh words for the Premier Kenney. He said he voted for him last election, says he won't make that mistake again this election, and says unless Kenney, quotes, unquotes, repents, the UCP will be wiped out in the next election, Derek.
Well, you left out the best part of the interview where you told us about his tattoo and he was trading Bibles for smokes.
And he had to hide his shank in his Bible. It was all pretty dramatic stuff.
Yeah. He learned the code pretty quick. Corey, we're obviously coming up to Good Friday and Easter here. Probably the second most important round of holidays on the Christian calendar. How do you, especially if you think we're going into the consensus, I guess, around this table is they'll probably wait till Easter itself is over before locking us down. They're probably just trying to stir up trouble if they lock us down before Easter and Good Friday. But I mean, the previous, the government would tell Pastor Coates, okay, well, you're going to pay this bail and you're going to abide by these conditions for release. And he told them in a very polite and Christian way to piss off. I'm sure using much more pastorally language than you or I or Dave would, but he held out and was now released without conditions. But we're going now into very possibly another lockdown. How much of a defeat for the government is this? It looked very bad to be locking up a preacher who, at least I'd say probably about at least half of Albertans think should not have been locked up. Certainly more than half of people who voted or intend to still vote UCP. How much of a problem was Pastor Coates for the government?
Well, he was and remains one. And, locking somebody up, I mean, it can't be understated. I mean, for a month, a person that's not of, a criminal bent. I mean, I enjoyed the hospitality of the Calgary Drunk Tank for one night back at the start of the 90s, and that shook me up. I'll never forget that smell. I couldn't imagine 30 days as a really law-abiding type of citizen in remand with that sort of a crowd. It's a terrible thing for just pursuing your faith. I mean, it's unimaginable, and we did that here, and it made international news, and it embarrassed the government. And as you said, we're coming up on a huge holiday. I mean, it means little to myself, except for that discount chocolate I can buy next week. But for a lot of people, it's very, very important. I mean, you talk to a lot of people, I guess, who are not hardcore Christians, but they'll go to services twice a year. They'll go to Easter and Christmas, and they've skipped Christmas. They skipped last year's Easter. They're going to be coming out. I believe the police were present at the Faith Church. Sheila Gunn-Reid was covering that live. They were trying to intimidate, and they're trying to push. Like, this is scary. This is a police state. You are bullying religious people from going to a very important service. I think we're going to see a lot of them coming out this weekend. We need to, as Pastor Coates said, though, and then we need more Albertans to get up, whether it's restaurants, whether it's individuals, and push back. I've said it before, and I know it'll upset people now, but we've got to overpower the crazies. I'm sorry, but I've gone to these demonstrations, and there are some very out there people there, maybe well-meaning, but it puts people off. They show up and they say, I'm not coming back to this crowd again. We need your common Albertans to come out. I'm going to come out this Saturday to the next one. I'll have a look around. But if I get more people talking to me about the lizard people and Jewish conspiracies, I'm not coming back again. So please, Albertans do have to get up. We have power. We can push this government back. But it's until it's dominated by common Albertans, unfortunately, these public protests backfire. I mean, that's part of where Pastor Coates and the interview last night was clear, though. He's a reasonable man. He's a thinking man. He's a peaceful man. And this was a man that was locked up in jail for a month. I mean, we got, rural
I'd
criminals.
be pretty unreasonable by then, but...
Yeah. So more people like that and more other individuals getting out there, and we can push the governments back. We really can. We've got that power. We've got to do it.
You're bang on. I'm the kind of person who would like to attend these protests. I think the vast majority of people at them are reasonable, but yeah, you're going to have the odd person who's taken in by conspiracy theories. It's microchips in our brains to control us. I mean, come on, guys. The pandemic is real. The reaction to it is not. That's where I draw the line. And my own view, I'd like to see more people out at these things. I think a lot more people would come out. I think you'd see wicked numbers if we maybe just do a better job of keeping people at the lizard people signs in the back.
And hey, they have the right to come out and have their voice too. It's just that, and they're maddeningly vocal. They're usually at the front of the line. And they have everybody has a right to come out to these things, but it's got to be dominated by rational.
Just please hold your
voices.
own protest.
That tipping point of common Albertans coming out who are concerned has to happen, and it might take a little while. I'm really going to hold high hopes for this weekend. The weather's going to be nice. Let's see some folks come out and speak up for themselves.
Dave, before we wrap up here, what does it really look like, at least the government in Alberta and in Saskatchewan is looking at doing? As we were discussing at the top of the show, British Columbia, Ontario, already under lockdown 2.5 or 3, depending on how you're slicing it. What's it looking like we're going to see? What's the feeling? What signals is the government sending about what they're going to do when we're past Easter?
Well, it's a difficult question, Derek. They're holding the cards to the chest. As you've said, Premier Kenney is not making himself available. They're leaving it to Dr. Kenney Hinshaw. NDP leader Rachel Notley, has been looking for more. I think, she was tweeting on the weekend about Grace Life Church and how the RCMP and Jason Kenney should be doing more to shut the Grace Life Church down. I guess Jason Kenney's probably sitting around the cabinet right now, just as Scott Moe is, wondering, do we have the political capital to move into lockdown again? I would think Scott Moe's in a better position because of the absolute majority he's got in the province. But Kenney's popularity right now is low. It's Alison Redford low. The next election is coming closer and closer every day. And how low does he want to take it? At some point, Corey is not going to be able to come back up.
No, it was recently actually Rick Bell wrote about that too, though. He thinks that Jason Kenney is actually quite opposed to locking down further, but he's just going to try and keep on the lowdown and avoid being pushed into it. But I'm not sure if that's the way to do it. Dig your head in and hope that it just passes over. You got to stand up and lead.
Well, that's what happened when we got pushed in the second lockdown. Kenney said, no, I want to try more individual responsibility stuff. And Notley was screaming that she wanted things shut down. Speaking of which, I know some people mentioned in the comments, Dave, you've done stories. Rachel Notley has been demanding that not just Pastor Coates be thrown back in jail, but she's demanding that Grace Life Church be shut down.
And that just shows how vulgar the NDP is. So, Jason, please don't blow it. We can't take 4 more years of those bloody borderline communists running this province. I mean, they're screaming to lock up people for holding services.
But at the end of the day, Jason Kenney, just 1 week later, did exactly what Rachel Notley wanted him to do last time. I don't have a lot of faith that, because to not lock us down again requires an admission that the first 2 lockdowns were a mistake. And you know what? I can forgive the first lockdown. We did not properly understand this virus. It was coming out of China, and China was jailing reporters, jailing doctors who were speaking up on it. We just didn't know how bad it was going to be. The initial reports showed that this was going to be more serious than it turned out to be. I can forgive the first lockdown. I know some of you watching or listening cannot. I can forgive the first lockdown. I cannot forgive the second lockdown because that was political. It was pure political pressure. They knew in their heart it was the wrong thing to do. They said it was wrong, and then they just gave in to political pressure. They do it a third time. Honestly, I don't think any of us are obliged to listen to what these people have to say. They lost their moral authority to govern us when they broke their own lockdown and took a vacation in Hawaii. So let's see if they have the gonads to do it. I hope to God that they have learned something, that while it's important for a government to stay popular and get reelected, polls are not everything. You should try just doing what you think is right sometimes and have some faith, just a little bit of faith, that the voters will judge you fairly at the end of the day. Okay, well, before we go, we're going to make it a regular reminder. If you're not already subscribed to the podcast, subscribe. Find Western Standard on your favorite podcast app. That'll get you the Pipeline. That'll get you the Corey Morgan Show, Mountain Standard Time with Nathan Gita, and, of course, Danielle Smith Uncensored when we have her for those special shows. If you're not yet a member of the Western Standard, go to westernstandardonline.com/membership. Try it free for 15 days. If you subscribe to an entire year-long membership, you'll save $21, and you're supporting bailout-free media. It'll feel good. Try it on for size. And of course, today's show was sponsored by Chiron's Way. As we mentioned at the beginning of the show, Chiron's Way is a natural and non-pharmaceutical treatment program that's affordable in the Calgary area to help you deal with stress and anxiety during times like this. Check out chironsway.com.
Just want to throw one plug up for this Friday, if I may.
Yes.
Okay, because I will be on with the Corey Morgan Show Friday from 10 till noon. I've got Marcel Latouche who's going to be on for 45 minutes to talk about municipal politics. People remember him from Danielle Smith's radio show. He gives some great common sense, and we're going to talk about the municipal guidebook and some provincial governance of issues and things and such. After that, I'm going to have Colin Craig from secondstreet.org coming on. They've done some polling and some other things to speak on there on how it relates to Canadian views and democracy.
Colin Craig's an old colleague of mine from the Canadian Taxpayers Federation.
Yes.
He ran it in Saskatchewan and Manitoba while I ran the show in Alberta. Very smart guy to have on. Yeah, so make sure you check out the Corey Morgan Show on Friday, 10 o'clock Mountain Time, 9 o'clock Pacific. If you're in the East, you're allowed to watch.
Yeah.
We'll let you watch. Well, we can't really stop you. And remember, next week, Mountain Standard Time with Nathan Gita starts. Same times, 10 o'clock Mountain, 9 o'clock Pacific. Dave?
Derek, give me an hour and I'll have that Dr. Modry letter up on our site.
Sounds good. You heard it here. Thank you very much, everyone. God bless. Have a great Good Friday. Have a good Friday and a great Easter. Thank you very much.